Joining us now to break down the day's top headlines is Pam Bondi, the former Florida Attorney General and former special advisor to President Trump. Pam, when we look at these latest calls to defund the police, it varies depending on who you ask, but that's essentially what was being debated today on Capitol Hill when they were looking at the different perspectives. So I want to get your response to those calls.
Alex, I've been a prosecutor since I was in my early 20s. Defunding the police would not only create anarchy, chaos, it would be one of the worst things you could do for our entire country. I know this firsthand, being a prosecutor. Police do so much good every single day. They help our kids get to school. They help us get to church, to work. How would we have a society, a free society in our country without our great men and women in law enforcement? That's the most ridiculous thing I can imagine happening in this country. And it's not going to happen under President Trump.
And when we talk about this, too, I think it's worth mentioning that defund the police is half of the agenda. What they want to do, too, if they do take away funding from police, is then reallocate those resources into different community programs. So I think that it's a little deceptive when they just say that they want to take away funding from the police. But I think it's also an acknowledgement of how much our police are asked to do. For example, they're not always kicking in doors, as we always see on TV or anything like that. They're responding to domestic violence situations, drug situations, no matter what it is. And so when we talk about that as well, in fact, I want to get your dog's opinion after you as well, because I mean, what an appearance right there. No, it's the best looking person on the screen. But when we talk about those reforms too, do we expect that maybe that could take place? We hear some Republicans saying that they may be open to that.
Well, you know, Alex, there are a lot. So when you talk about defunding, right, there are other things that we could do additionally, like mental health. As a career prosecutor, I've seen so many people that did not belong in jail that had severe mental health issues. So what we need to do is increase mental health counseling, funding, training, but not take away from the good men and women in law enforcement. So yeah, there's a lot of other things that we can do in addition to help. And I think that's going to be part of the president's program that Mark Meadows is working on with Senator Scott. So very, very excited about that. And I think that's going to really be very productive for our country.
I think you're right. And this seems like something, too, where the two sides can find some common ground. I mean, I'm not going to say that Republicans are going to come out with defunding the police or anything, but I think the First Step Act is a testament to the idea that there are shifts being made right now that the both sides can agree on. And that's something that is relatively rare in today's political climate. So I think that we might see some progress. But then I also want to look at the DOJ as well. And they're looking at, for example, prosecuting some of the people who took a more violent approach during these protests. In fact, I don't even want to call them protests. I think these are agitators who infiltrated those protests for their own nefarious means. So when we look at what the DOJ is doing now, what does that process look like?
Well, and thank you for saying that. You have protesters and you have criminals. And the people that were breaking into stores, looting. I was in Washington, D.C. I saw people with a mallet breaking out store windows in the middle of the night. They're criminals and they need to be locked up. They must be locked up. What about these mayors and these police officers who are ordered? The police officers are ordered. They arrest hundreds of people, and then they're told by their mayors, release them immediately? That's ridiculous. That's jeopardizing the lives of police officers. You and I know that. It's ridiculous what they're doing. So yes, if you commit a crime during a protest, during a protest, you should be charged. We have a lot of good, honest protesters out there, young people, old people, wanting to make a difference. You know, we saw so many African-American families out there with their kids, showing them what to do, how to try to make a change in this world. But then when you bring in the looters, the criminals, the people throwing things at police, that should not be tolerated, nor under President Trump will it ever be tolerated in our country, because he is a law and order president.
I think that's so well said, because even when we look at the communities that were destroyed, the people who deal with that aftermath are the people who are living there to begin with, many of which are immigrants, many of which are from minority communities to begin with. So when we see people coming in, taking advantage of the situation, really only making it worse. I mean, they may have got the media attention that they want, but they're destroying that community. So we hear President Trump say that he wants to make them domestic terrorists too, label them as that. Antifa, I want to be clear, not just anybody in general, but Antifa. What are the hurdles when it comes to that as well? And does that help this situation?
Well, I think Antifa are domestic terrorists, and I would have no problem with them being labeled domestic terrorists. And what they do, I think the problem, Alex, is they come in and they mix in with your peaceful protesters. That's what they do. And in turn, they jeopardize the safety of the peaceful protesters. So it's really, it's quite a mess that's happening around our country. But if we are not a country of law and order, and again, you and I both agree what happened to George Floyd was horrible. Those 4 police officers belong in jail. They need to stay in prison, go to prison. But the good men and women of law enforcement, more than 98% of them, we need to look out for them and we need to protect them because they protect us. And by the way, I've been to way too many funerals of law enforcement officers in my career who were murdered in the line of duty.
No, I think that's very well said, too. And the people who are throwing bricks into a mom-and-pop store just to steal what's inside, those aren't people who are caring about the life and legacy of George Floyd. Those are people who are taking advantage of this situation. And I think you're right to say that they need to be held accountable for that. But Pam Bondi, I really appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.